The alien queen watched him repair her ship, then whispered, "Marry me." Human, the ship drifted silently through the dark void of space, its sleek surface glinting faintly under the distant glow of a far-off star. Inside the vessel, Commander James Hawk worked diligently. His eyes were focused, his hands moving swiftly and expertly over the alien technology that filled the ship's interior. It wasn't his first time dealing with alien machinery, but there was something uniquely challenging about this vessel. It was ancient, older than anything humanity had encountered before, and it was in need of serious repairs. James had always been good with machines. His reputation as one of the best engineers on Earth had earned him a spot in the crew of the Courageous, a human exploration ship that had come across this derelict alien craft by accident. The ship had been abandoned, and its alien crew wiped out by an unknown force. Now it was up to James and a handful of others to fix the ship and figure out what had happened. His mind was sharp, always analyzing the intricacies of the systems around him. As he worked, he couldn't help but feel a strange connection to the ship. It wasn't like the usual machinery he worked with back on Earth. This ship had an intelligence of its own. There was a life to it, a pulse that seemed to hum softly beneath his fingers as he adjusted its damaged components. But it wasn't the ship that caught James' attention today. It was her. In the far corner of the room, the stasis pod that had once held the ship's queen had begun to activate. The thick, glassy surface of the pod had begun to hum as a soft light enveloped the figure inside. James didn't pay much attention at first, thinking it was another system coming online. But then, as the pod's lid slowly began to open, he realized something else was happening. A figure stepped out, tall, regal, and impossibly beautiful. Her skin was a pale blue, almost translucent, with intricate markings running across her arms and neck. Her hair was long, flowing like liquid silver, and her eyes were a deep, piercing purple, filled with a wisdom that James could feel even from across the room. She moved gracefully, as though the very air around her bent to her will. James stood frozen for a moment, caught off guard. He had seen alien species before, but nothing like this. The woman before him was no ordinary being. She radiated power, but there was something else in her gaze, something unexpected. Curiosity, hope. She looked at him as if she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. There was no fear, no hesitation in her expression. Instead, there was a quiet confidence, as though she already knew everything there was to know about him. "Human," she spoke, her voice low and melodic with an accent that seemed to resonate in his chest. "You are the one who will fix my ship." James blinked, his mouth dry. He wasn't sure how to respond. I'm here to repair it, yes. My team and I are doing everything we can." The alien queen stepped closer, her movements fluid and graceful. Her presence was overwhelming, as though her very being filled the room. "Your people are more capable than I expected," she said. "I see it now. You will save us." James took a cautious step back, unsure of her intentions. He wasn't used to being the subject of someone's scrutiny, especially not someone who appeared as powerful as this queen. He was just an engineer, a man who fixed things, and yet here he was standing before an alien queen responsible for the fate of her ship and possibly her people. "You," James started, still unsure of what was happening. "Who are you? Where are your people?" The queen's expression darkened for a moment, and James noticed the subtle change in her posture. It was as though a weight had fallen on her shoulders. "I am the last of my kind. My people were destroyed. Our enemies, the Azar, wiped us out." Her voice was tinged with sorrow, a rare crack in her otherwise composed demeanor. "I was placed in stasis to survive. My ship, our home, is all that remains." James felt a pang of sympathy for her, despite the strangeness of the situation. He had known of alien species wiped out by war or disease, but to meet one in person, to see the aftermath of that destruction, it hit him harder than he expected. "I'll do everything I can," James said, his voice more determined now. He could see the pain in her eyes and knew he couldn't just walk away. "I'll fix the ship. We'll get you out of here." The queen studied him for a long moment, her gaze intense, almost as though she were seeing through him. Then slowly she nodded. "I believe you." She took another step forward, her purple eyes never leaving his. "And once the ship is repaired, I will ask for something more, something I can't live without." Her voice was soft but carried a weight that seemed to hang in the air. James frowned, unsure of what she meant. "What do you need?" Her smile was almost imperceptible, but it was there, an enigmatic curve of her lips. You human, I need you, I need your mind, your skills, your heart. James was taken aback. I don't understand, I'm just an engineer. I'm here to fix the ship, nothing more. The Queen's smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet resolve. You are more than you know, and once the repairs are complete, you will understand. James didn't have time to respond before the ship's alarms blared, signaling a breach in the outer hull. The Azar, they had found them. The Queen's expression turned cold, her regal composure returning as if it had never wavered. They are coming. We do not have much time. James nodded. There was no time to think about the Queen's strange words, not now. He had to focus. He turned back to the ship's console, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls, trying to stabilize the systems. But his thoughts kept drifting back to her, this alien queen who had offered him so much more than he could understand. The ship rocked violently as a series of blasts hit the hull. James gritted his teeth and kept working. He couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. In the distance, he could hear the Queen's voice again, soft and commanding. Do not worry, human, I will protect you. Her words should have comforted him, but they only left him with more questions. Who was she really? And why did she look at him as if he were the answer to everything? As the repair systems came online, James finally got a glimpse of what the ship could truly do. The energy readings were off the charts, and he had no doubt the ship's weapons were capable of taking on the Azar. But it wasn't enough to fight them off, not without full power. Almost there, James muttered to himself, tapping in the final adjustments. But then, before he could finish, the Queen appeared beside him, her eyes meeting his. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible over the chaos. Marry me, human? James froze. He couldn't have heard that right. What? Her gaze was steady, unwavering. You heard me, she said softly. Marry me, and together we will rebuild my people. You will be more than just an engineer. You will be a king. James didn't know how to respond. He was still processing everything that had happened, still reeling from the fact that an alien queen had just asked him to marry her. It didn't make sense. But in that moment, as the ship rocked under another wave of attacks, one thing became clear. His life would never be the same again. He wasn't just fixing a ship. He was being pulled into something far greater than himself, something he could never have imagined. And deep down, James couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. James could feel the weight of the Queen's words pressing down on him, but there was no time to think about them. The ship rocked again and a loud blast echoed from the outside, rattling the walls. The Azar were closing in. He had to focus. He had to get the ship up and running. Almost there, he muttered under his breath, his fingers moving swiftly across the console. The alien technology was complicated, but James was used to challenges. He had worked on military ships, civilian vessels, and even space stations, but nothing quite like this. The ship was a marvel of design, each system unlike anything he'd ever seen. But at the core, it was still just a machine that needed fixing. His mind raced as he worked. The Queen's request, her strange offer, still lingered in the back of his mind. Marry me, he couldn't understand it. She was the queen of an alien species, an entity beyond his comprehension, and yet she was asking him to marry her. Was it an offer of survival, or something deeper, more personal? The question burned in his mind, but the blaring alarms of the ship brought him back to the present. We don't have time for this, James said aloud to himself. He wasn't sure if he was talking about the Queen or the Azar. Maybe both. He activated the main power core, and the ship hummed to life, but it wasn't enough. The ship's outer defenses were still offline. The Azar would be here soon, and they needed the full capabilities of the ship to fend them off. James checked the systems again, his heart pounding in his chest. There was still something missing, a crucial piece of the puzzle. Then he heard her again. You can't do this alone, human, the Queen said, her voice smooth and confident as she appeared beside him. James looked up from the console to see her standing there, her figure casting a soft glow in the dim light of the ship. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, he felt something shift between them. It wasn't just the weight of her presence, it was something deeper, something he couldn't quite explain. I don't need your help, James replied, though his voice lacked the confidence he wanted to project. He wasn't sure why he said it. It wasn't true. He did need her help. But admitting it felt wrong. She was an alien queen and he was a human engineer. They were too different. The whole situation was too strange. But the Queen didn't flinch at his words. She merely stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were studying him. You misunderstand me, human. I am not offering help. I am offering what you need. I have knowledge of this ship, knowledge you will not find anywhere else. Together we can fix it. Together we can survive. James felt the weight of her gaze, and for the first time he wondered if she was right. He had been so focused on the task at hand, on the technical challenges, that he hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. The Azar were coming. They were powerful, ruthless, and James had no doubt they would stop at nothing to destroy the ship and whatever was left of the Thean. If they wanted to survive, they needed every advantage they could get. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned back to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. The systems were slowly coming online, but it was still too slow. The ship's weapons, its defense shields, they were all too far from full power. The Queen watched him for a moment longer, her face unreadable. Then, without a word, she moved past him, her delicate fingers brushing against the console. A soft hum filled the air as she activated a series of commands, her touch bringing the alien technology to life in a way James hadn't thought possible. The ship seemed to respond to her in a way it hadn't responded to him. He watched in awe as the ship's power core stabilized, the energy readings spiking in a way that made his heart race. "How did you?" "Like I said," the Queen replied, her voice calm, "I have knowledge of this ship. I am its creator, its protector. And I have the ability to awaken it when necessary." James stared at her, his mind whirling. This wasn't just some alien queen. She was tied to this ship, connected to it in ways he couldn't begin to understand. Her people, the Thean, had created this ship, had designed it with their advanced technology and knowledge, and now she was the key to unlocking its full potential. The Queen looked at him, her eyes softening ever so slightly. "I've done what I can. Now you must finish it." James nodded, his determination returning. This wasn't just about fixing the ship anymore. It was about survival. It was about saving them both. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. The Queen didn't respond with words. Instead, she stepped aside, allowing him to continue his work. James could feel her presence behind him, her gaze unwavering as he worked. Despite the chaos outside, despite the Azar closing in, there was a sense of calm between them now, an unspoken understanding. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. James wasn't sure. Time seemed to lose its meaning as he focused on the task at hand. Every system needed his attention, every control had to be optimized. The ship was a complex organism, its systems interconnected in ways that were both beautiful and maddening. Finally, with a final press of a button, James completed the last sequence. The ship's power surged, its systems humming to life in unison. The weapons were active. The shields were online, the engines roared to life with an intensity that shook the entire ship. They were ready. "We're ready," James said, his voice filled with relief. The Queen stood beside him, her eyes gleaming with pride. "You have done well, human. But the battle is not over. We are still vulnerable." James didn't need her to remind him. He could hear the Azar ships approaching, their weapons charging in the distance. The time for repairs was over. Now it was time for battle. The Queen's voice dropped to a whisper. "You will need more than just this ship to defeat them. You will need strategy, you will need strength, and you will need me." James turned to her, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The Queen's eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering. "I may be the last of my kind, but I am not powerless. Together we can fight the Azar. Together we can take back what was stolen from us." James stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. There was no turning back now. He was in this not just to fix a ship, but to fight a war, one he couldn't possibly win alone. "You're right," he said finally, his voice steady. "We'll fight together." The Queen nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Then let us begin." With the ship fully powered up and ready for battle, James and the Queen prepared for the confrontation ahead. The Azar were closing in fast, and there was no time to waste. The fight for survival had begun, and this time it would be a fight they would face together. The ship shook once again as another blast hit its outer hull. The sound was deafening, echoing through the metal walls. James' hands gripped the console tighter as the ship groaned under the force of the attack. He could see the flashing red warning lights, feel the pressure building up. They were close. The Azar had found them. "Prepare yourself," the Queen's voice cut through the tension, calm and composed as always. She stood by his side, her eyes focused on the control panels. "The Azar will not stop until we are destroyed, but neither will we." James nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The ship's systems were fully online now, its power restored, but he knew they needed more. They needed strategy, and that was where he came in. This wasn't just about firepower. This was about using everything they had to outsmart the Azar. The Queen's gaze shifted toward him. She seemed to sense the thought in his mind. I trust you, human. You have shown that you can think beyond what others see. We need that now. James glanced at her, his mind racing. She was right. He had to think differently. The Azar were relentless, but they were predictable. They would expect a straight fight. But he knew, with the right moves, he could turn the tide in their favor. It wasn't about overpowering them. It was about using the ship's advanced capabilities in ways they hadn't yet explored. Let's lure them in, James said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. We'll use their aggression against them. The Queen studied him for a moment and then slowly nodded. Lead the way. James tapped into the ship's communication system, sending out a distress signal, knowing the Azar would pick it up. It was a simple trick, one designed to draw them in. The distress call would look like a weak, vulnerable target, a ship in need of help. They would come in fast and eager to finish the job. But what the Azar didn't know was that the ship had more firepower than they could possibly imagine. James had access to the weapons systems now, and he intended to use every bit of them. The moment the Azar ships drew close enough, they would find themselves caught in a trap. The ship's internal systems hummed with activity as James set the trap into motion. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, he said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. The moment they think they've won, we'll strike. The Queen moved behind him, her presence as commanding as ever. Do not hesitate, human. The moment you make the move, there will be no turning back. You must act decisively. James didn't need to hear more. He already knew. This was it. The battle for survival was about to begin. Minutes felt like hours as the Azar ships closed in. The tension in the air was palpable, every second stretching out as James waited for the right moment to strike. His fingers hovered over the controls, every part of him alert and ready. He could feel the Queen's gaze on him, sharp and unwavering. He knew she was relying on him. The Azar ships appeared on the radar, large, menacing, and closing in fast. James's heart raced. They were here. The trap was set. Now he had to move quickly. Now, James muttered under his breath. With a swift motion, he activated the ship's cloaking mechanism, causing the vessel to momentarily disappear from the Azar's sensors. It was a calculated risk, one that relied on perfect timing. For a brief moment, the ship was invisible to the enemy. But it wouldn't last long. The Azar ships flew right into the trap, their weapons charging, expecting an easy victory. But as they entered the ship's firing range, James hit the button that triggered the ship's weapon systems. A barrage of energy blasts shot out from the ship, catching the Azar off guard. The first wave of shots disabled their shields, leaving their ships vulnerable. The Queen's voice rang through the comms, strong and filled with authority. Now, human, strike them down. James didn't hesitate. He locked onto the nearest Azar vessel, aiming his shot with precision. The ship's weapons systems, now fully powered, delivered a devastating blow, ripping through the enemy ship's hull. It exploded in a burst of light and debris, the first of many victories to come. But the Azar weren't done. They regrouped quickly, unleashing a counterattack of their own. The remaining Azar ships began to fire relentlessly, their weapons blasting through the ship's outer defenses. James could feel the ship shudder under the force of the blasts, but he kept his focus, adjusting the ship's trajectory to avoid the worst of the attacks. They're relentless, James said through gritted teeth, his hands flying over the controls. We can't keep this up for long. We won't have to, the Queen replied calmly, her voice unwavering. They will break soon. You have proven that we are not to be underestimated. James nodded, though he knew the battle wasn't over yet. He activated the ship's evasive maneuvers, dodging the Azar's attacks as he lined up another shot. This time, he wasn't just shooting to disable. He was going for the kill. The Azar had underestimated them, and now they would pay for it. Another blast hit the ship, this time near the engines, sending a shockwave through the hull. James gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control. The ship's systems were beginning to show signs of strain, but they weren't finished yet. He wasn't finished yet. Now's our chance, James said, his voice low but filled with conviction. He fired another round, this time aiming directly for the Azar flagship. The shot hit its mark, tearing through the enemy vessel's core. The ship erupted in flames, the Azar flagship reduced to nothing but space debris. The Queen's voice echoed through the comms, filled with pride. "Well done, human. You have done what few could." But James wasn't finished. The Azar fleet was still intact, and they were regrouping for a final assault. He couldn't let them get the upper hand. He gripped the controls tighter, his mind working fast. The ship had more weapons, more than the Azar could handle. It was time to finish what they had started. The Queen stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the screen. "We can do this together. I will help you guide the ship." James nodded, grateful for her calm presence. Together they worked in perfect sync, directing the ship's weapons with precision. One by one, the Azar ships fell, their fleets crumbling before the combined might of human ingenuity and alien technology. The last Azar ship was disabled, its weapons system destroyed. The remaining forces quickly retreated, realizing they had been defeated. James leaned back in his seat, his breath coming in short gasps. They had done it. Against all odds, they had won. The Queen stood beside him, her eyes filled with admiration. "You have proven yourself human. You have saved us." James couldn't help but smile, though he was exhausted. "I didn't do it alone." The Queen's gaze softened. "No, we did it together." For a moment, the battle seemed to fade away. The ship was still alive, still intact. They had survived, but it was more than that. They had accomplished something far greater. The Queen had trusted him, and he had earned her trust in return. "Thank you," James said, his voice sincere, "for everything." The Queen's smile was faint but genuine. "You are welcome, human, but the journey is far from over." "We must rebuild." James nodded, knowing she was right. This was just the beginning. But for now, he allowed himself a brief moment of peace, knowing they had made it through the worst. The battle was won, but the real work was just starting. The aftermath of the battle was silent but not peaceful. The ship, though victorious, was heavily damaged. James stood in the command center, staring at the blinking lights on the console, still processing everything that had just happened. The Azar had been defeated, but at what cost? The ship's hull was torn, its weapons system severely compromised, and the engines were sputtering, barely holding together. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. They had won, yes, but the fight had taken its toll. The Queen had helped, but she had never seemed to show any sign of fear or doubt. It was almost as though she was always prepared for something like this. But James was human, and he felt the weight of everything that had just happened. The Azar, the destruction, the feeling that they were barely holding on, it was a lot to process. The Queen entered the command center, her steps light and graceful as always. She had been inspecting the rest of the ship, her keen eyes scanning for any remaining threats or weaknesses. When she saw James, her expression softened, though it was hard to tell if she was truly relieved or if it was simply a mask she wore. "You are troubled," she observed, her voice calm. "The battle is over, you should rest." James turned to her, shaking his head slightly. "I don't know if I can, there's so much damage, the ship. It's not just the outer hull, it's deeper than that. The core systems are barely stable. I've never seen a ship this damaged and still functioning." The Queen stepped closer, her presence filling the room. "We have time," she said, her words as steady as ever. "You have done more than enough. Now let me show you how we will rebuild. This ship, my people, we are not lost, not yet." James was taken aback by her words. He knew she had said before that they were the last of her kind, but the more she spoke about rebuilding, the more it sounded like she wasn't simply talking about the ship. She had a vision, one that went beyond just surviving. She was thinking about the future. "Rebuild," he repeated, trying to make sense of her words. "You mean the ship, or more than that?" The Queen's eyes locked with his, her gaze intense. "More than that, I will not be the last of the Thean. We will rebuild our civilization, and I will rule once again. But this time I will not be alone. You and I, together, we will rebuild everything." James felt a strange tension in the air. Her words were clear, yet they carried a weight he hadn't anticipated. She was offering more than just survival. She was offering a future. But what did that mean for him? What did it mean for a human to be part of the rebuilding of an entire alien civilization? Before he could respond, the ship jolted again, the alarms ringing out. It wasn't another attack, but something else, something more urgent. The Queen turned toward the console, her expression unreadable as she quickly began analyzing the new readings. James moved to her side, his heart still racing from the earlier battle. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tense. "The core systems are unstable." "The damage is worse than I anticipated," the Queen said. "The ship's energy reserves are draining rapidly. We need to make immediate repairs or we will lose power entirely." James's eyes widened. They had just won a battle, but now it looked like the true fight for survival was about to begin. They couldn't afford to lose power now, not with the ship in such a vulnerable state. The Azar could return at any moment, and they would be sitting ducks without the ship's full capabilities. "I'll get to work," James said, turning toward the control panel, but the Queen stopped him with a hand on his arm. "No," she said, her voice firm but calm. "You have done enough for today. I will handle the repairs. You need to trust me." James hesitated, unsure. He had always been the one to fix things. It was his job, his responsibility. But something in the Queen's eyes told him that she was capable of more than he could understand. She seemed to sense his hesitation. "I will not let you down, human," she said. "I have the knowledge of my people, my ancestors. I can restore this ship, but I will need your help." "When the time comes," James nodded slowly. "All right, I trust you." The Queen stepped aside, her fingers moving over the console with a fluidity that seemed almost unnatural. The ship hummed to life again, and the power levels began to stabilize. For the first time in what felt like forever, James allowed himself to relax just a little. He watched the Queen work, amazed at the ease with which she navigated the systems. It was like she was one with the ship, the technology flowing through her as naturally as breathing. Minutes passed and the tension in the room eased. The ship's power stabilized, the alarms quieting as the energy reserves were replenished. The Queen turned back to James, her face a mask of calm confidence. "It is done," she said. "The ship will hold for now." James let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "I don't know how you did that, but I'm grateful." The Queen didn't respond right away. She simply studied him as though considering something. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice softer now. "You do not yet understand the full scope of what I am offering, human, but I will show you in time. You will see that together we can rebuild not just this ship, but everything." James didn't know how to respond to that. The Queen had spoken before about rebuilding, but this was the first time it had sounded personal. She wasn't just offering a partnership in survival, she was offering something more. Something that went beyond the ship, beyond their immediate survival. But what did it mean? And why was she so certain that he was the one to help her? "I've never been one to look at the big picture," James said, his voice almost a whisper. "I've always just fixed what was in front of me, the ship, the systems. I've never thought beyond that." The Queen smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone who was just offering empty comfort. It was knowing, almost as if she had been waiting for him to say this. "Then you will learn," she said. "You have the mind of a builder, a creator, but you will need more than that. You will need vision, human. You will need to see beyond what you know and embrace what is possible." James swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. He wasn't sure he was ready for whatever the Queen was asking of him. But something about her words, the conviction in her voice, made him want to believe her, to trust her. He nodded slowly. "I'll learn, I'll help, we'll rebuild." The Queen's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have proven yourself human. I knew you were capable. Now we will see just how far that capability will take us." The moment hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken promises and challenges yet to come. James couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that whatever came next would be something he couldn't possibly have imagined. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. Together, they could face whatever challenges the galaxy threw at them. And with the Queen by his side, perhaps they could rebuild not just a ship, but an entire civilization. A future. A legacy. James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. He wasn't alone anymore. Together they would rise from the ashes of the past. The future was theirs to create. The stars outside the ship's window twinkled like scattered diamonds, distant and cold. But inside there was a warmth, a sense of purpose that James had never felt before. The ship had been fully repaired, its systems humming to life with the strength of something reborn. It was a symbol of their survival, a testament to the hard work of both him and the Queen. And now it was time to move forward. James stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the star-filled expanse. The Queen was beside him, as always. She had been by his side through the repairs, guiding him through the alien technology with patience and precision. Her expertise had been invaluable, but there was something more, a bond between them that neither could deny. It was subtle, but it was there, growing stronger with each passing day. "I've always been just a fixer," James said, his voice low as he looked at the Queen. "I never thought about rebuilding, about what comes next. I just wanted to make sure the ship worked and that we survived." The Queen's eyes softened and she took a step closer to him. "Survival is important, human, but it is not the end of the journey. You've shown me that you can think beyond the immediate. Now we must look to the future." James turned to her, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean by that? What future are we talking about?" "The future of my people," the Queen said quietly. "We were on the brink of extinction, but now, with you by my side, we have the chance to rebuild, to reclaim what was lost." James felt the weight of her words. The Queen was no longer speaking just of survival. She was speaking of a new beginning, something far more significant than he had ever imagined. He had come into this situation as a simple engineer focused on fixing a ship. But now he was part of something much larger. He wasn't just repairing a machine, he was helping to rebuild a civilization, a future. "We can't do it alone," James said, his voice steady but filled with a sense of determination. "We need to find others, allies, people who will help us rebuild." The Queen nodded. "I know. And that is where you come in. You have connections, your people, the humans." James thought about it for a moment. He had always been an engineer, not a diplomat, but he knew the importance of what the Queen was asking. The Thean had suffered greatly at the hands of the Azar, and now they needed to rebuild. And he was the key to bridging the gap between their two species. "I can contact Earth," James said, his mind already racing with the possibilities. "I can reach out to the human fleet. They'll want to help. We can't do this alone, but with their help we might just stand a chance." The Queen smiled, the faintest hint of relief in her eyes. "I knew you would understand. Your people are more than just survivors. They are builders just as you are. Together we can create something new." James felt a sense of purpose settle over him. For the first time since the battle with the Azar, he felt that the fight was no longer about mere survival. It was about something greater. It was about hope. It was about rebuilding, not just a ship, but an entire civilization. And he was going to be a part of that. He turned back to the console and began working on the communication systems. He had no idea how long it would take to reach Earth, or if they would even be willing to listen. But one thing was clear. He had to try. He couldn't let the Queen and the Thean fall back into the shadows. They deserved more than that. They deserved a chance to rebuild. As the communication systems powered up, James couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. He wasn't just fixing things anymore. He was helping to shape a new world, and it was a daunting task, but it was also an exciting one. The Queen stood behind him, her presence as powerful as ever. He could feel her watching him, but this time it wasn't with the same intensity as before. There was a sense of calm, a shared understanding between them. They were in this together. The screen in front of him flickered to life, the communication array linking to the human fleet. James' heart raced as he waited for a response. The seconds felt like hours. Finally, a voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Fleet Command. Who is this?" James took a deep breath, his hands steady as he spoke. "This is Commander James Hawk. I'm aboard an alien ship. Well, not just an alien ship, but a whole civilization. The Thean. Their queen has asked for help in rebuilding. I'm reaching out to you because we need your support. We need your people to help us." The voice on the other end was silent for a moment, and then it spoke again. "You're alive, and you're with the Thean Queen. Are you saying you've allied with them?" James nodded, even though he knew they couldn't see him. "Yes. We've already fought off the Azar, but now we need to rebuild. We need resources, support, and most of all, time. We can't do this alone." The voice hesitated, then responded. "We'll need to verify this, but we're listening. Stay where you are. We'll send a fleet to rendezvous with you, and we'll discuss how we can help. But understand this, if you're asking for Earth's help, you better be certain this is real." "I'm certain," James replied, his voice unwavering. "And I'll prove it. We can build something new together." A future. The communication ended, and James leaned back in his chair, the weight of what he had just done settling over him. He had made the call. Now they would wait. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about forging a future, one step at a time. The Queen stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "You've done well, human. I knew you would succeed." James smiled, but it was a tired smile. "We're not there yet. We still have a long way to go." "We will get there," she said, her voice steady with quiet confidence. "Together," James nodded. "Together." The stars outside the ship continued to sparkle, vast and distant, but now they seemed a little less cold. There was hope in the air, a hope that had been rekindled by the Queen, by the Thean, and by the humans who would join them. There was work to do, yes, But for the first time in a long while, James felt certain that they would make it. He had faith in his people, and he had faith in the Queen. They were a team now, and together they would rebuild. As the ship drifted through the stars, James knew this was just the beginning. They had survived the Azar. Now they would survive together. They would build something new, a future where the Thean would rise again, and humanity would play its part in the creation of something greater than either species could have achieved alone. The Queen stood beside him, looking out at the stars. For a brief moment, James saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, a hope that matched his own. They were no longer just two survivors. They were the beginning of something much more.